Today we're joined by Nicole Gibson, author of Love Out Loud and founder of inTruth.
Gibson.
Nicole Gibson.
Nicole Gibson. One of the 100 top influential people.
inTruth Technologies is the first company in the world that has successfully found a way to biometrically track emotion. So we're always subconsciously, I think, building the thing that we most crave and we most need. Like how do you quantify something that just kind of is there, but to me, it wasn't a satisfying answer.
The adaptation is like such a big part of it, of everything that you're doing.
Exactly. Adaptation, flexibility, the ability to deal with ambiguity, I think is going to be the thing that separates amazing entrepreneurs from those that can't go that kind of extra mile. And most amazing entrepreneurs say it, you have to be a city like San Francisco, New York, London, you're not going to eat or pay rent unless you're the best. Every occupation that has been built to try to help people with their emotion only deals with the subjective. Psychologist, it's conversation. How are you feeling? Well, I'm here because I don't know how to express how I'm feeling, so this is a really unhelpful dynamic. inTruth will hopefully pioneer such a new way of looking at this and understanding it that will look back at the way we used to try to get there and recognize that we were.
As a founder, what's a non-negotiable?
I'd say that the biggest one is choosing investment partners that
Work-life balance.
when you're solving something that you're obsessed with, there's
That is the balance.
that is it. When you raise your first big chunk of capital, do not. People with lived experience of all kinds of mental health conditions were seen as unequipped to actually have a voice in how mental health should be treated. I was following the guidance actually of what I thought it meant to be a good performer. That perfect young performer, which was, heavily linked to body image. And for someone that's going through anorexia, it's visible. I dropped 30 kilos off my body weight. And that happened in a very short amount of time. The weaker I got and the more real the prospect of like an adrenal crisis or a heart attack became, the clearer it got that I wasn't willing to die for that. That my life had to be about more than that. You can only experience the highest joy if you've experienced the deepest pain. I had to rebuild my inner world from the inside out. Every thought, every behaviour, that was self-destructive, which became my entire life. I had to turn that into something that actually helped my flourishing. And I just thought to myself, there's got to be fucking more to this.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute honor and a pleasure to have you on our show.
Thanks, guys.
I'd love to kick things off just around your journey and I guess the knowledge and insight you're bringing into the world around AI. Talk to me about the journey you've been on to get to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I think like any founder, right? It's the journey starts long before you found the company.
Yes.
And in my case, that's very true. When I look back at my journey, what I think I see the most is how much I've always been trying to solve this one problem. And when I met you guys, and I was giving that talk at the event where we met, I think I was saying this too, like the best founders are the most obsessed with solving a single problem, in my opinion. And so when I go back in my past, all the way to really childhood, seeing the world in a very different way, having quite different experiences, I think. I went to many different schools, left to mainstream school at 15 to go to an arts academy. So very diverse experiences, traveled the world at a very young age. I was always perplexed by people's unwillingness to be present with things that were emotionally difficult. And for whatever reason, that became this kind of fixation that I had and this problem that I wanted to solve, which, if you now look at the facts that I'm creating inTruth, which is a world first technology to actually be able to see emotion for the first time, to measure it for the first time, to try to bring some kind of standardization to the language of emotion. I can see that obsession started for me at a very young age. I think it catalyzed when I went through adversity as a teenager. I went to an arts academy that I loved. I kind of call it the best and worst years. The best years because I got to do the thing that I loved, which was performance. That was my first love for sure. The thing that I didn't have, which, I now hope my work can help people find was the self-love and the self-assurance and the emotional capacity to deal with the pressures that I was under at that time in my life, because that role as a performer was excelling, and it was excelling at a young age. And for me, that resulted in dealing with a life-threatening eating disorder, which was, I think, a very unique experience in that a lot of people that go through mental health challenges, I think, they have invisible scars. Someone that's dealing with anxiety or depression, as an example, you can't physically see it, and it's, I think, somewhat easier to conceal. For someone that's going through anorexia, it's visible. I dropped 30 kilos off my body weight. So, and that happened in a very short amount of time. And anorexia is often seen, more as a physical and mental health condition, but I kind of see it more like an addiction. I think that when you look at the behavior of anorexia, it mirrors more of an addiction than it does anything else, because it's a compulsive behavior that starts to socially isolate you, that starts to disconnect you from, the things that you truly love and the people you love, and you develop a very sort of intense amount of secrecy around your behavior because you don't want to recover. And I think this is what's quite different to anorexia for anorexia compared to other conditions. It's like you're unwell, but you have a phobia of getting better. So if you think about most other conditions, except for addiction, you want to get better.
Yeah.
Cancer, you want to get better. Depression, you want to get better. Someone who's a drug addict or someone that's dealing with anorexia, often, it takes the absolute breaking point before they surrender.
Did not know that it was like classified or like it's seen that way and not as an addiction, just from looking at the outside. Like it's like
Yeah.
exactly what you describe. If it seems like from people I know that have gone through it, there are a lot of those traits. So it's interesting that the world hasn't seen it that way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
Still doesn't, right?
Yeah.
I think even back then, so I was diagnosed, kind of formally diagnosed at 16. I'm 32 now, so we're going back 16 years ago in the mental health system. Really, like, some doctors took it on face value because the definition of anorexia nervosa means a loss of appetite. So, they're treating you as if you're
Not
Hungry?
No, I
not
agree.
hungry. And I can tell you right now, without, being too humorous about it, like, people that are struggling with anorexia are definitely hungry. That has nothing to do with that. But I think, there is a growing recognition of different types of addiction. Like, there's a sort of gambling addiction, and some people are now acknowledging anorexia or other eating disorders as behavioral addictions versus like physiological addiction, which might be, I don't know, like heroin addiction, for example. But within that, I had to basically decide if I wanted to live. And I think at a very young age, because my health had deteriorated so much, being confronted with that choice, it sets you on a very different path in life. I think, I've had the privilege over my career to talk to so many different kinds of people, all different ages. And I would say in the kind of afternoon of people's lives, these usually tend to be the questions that people start asking. What is the meaning of my life? What is the purpose of my life? What does it all mean? But the addiction had such an intense grip on me at such a young age that I had to find that will somehow to overcome it, because the other option was to die.
How did you manage to find that will? What was the driving force?
It's a very hard question to answer, because I think as you fade into lifelessness, and I mean, for me, that was as my body was getting weaker and weaker, you feel in that state, you feel your life force. Like, I have so much vitality now and so much energy for life and so much I want to achieve, and I can see the future so clearly. In that state, it was like I was, my spirit was moving in the opposite direction. I was becoming lifeless. And as that nears, it's like something very innate and deep inside of you, activates. And the weaker I got, and And the more real the prospect of like an adrenal crisis or a heart attack became, the clearer it got that I wasn't willing to die for that. That my life had to be about more than that. And especially because I had this talent that I loved so much, and I was dealing with this very deep heartbreak actually, because it is kind of comparable to like a sports player that trains, you know, their whole college life and then has a life changing injury and they're not able to actually pursue professional sport. For me, I was following the guidance actually of what I thought it meant to be a good performer. Like I was trying to hit every benchmark of what that perfect young performer was, which was, you know, heavily linked to body image and all kinds of things related to that. So to hit that point where actually, you know, one of my doctor's orders was you can no longer perform because it's too physically tolling on you. Like theater, the type of theater I was doing was very physical. So I wasn't allowed to exercise.
Wow.
I had to deal with that heartbreak, you know, and it's like, it's I think a different, deeper kind of heartbreak to your first romantic heartbreak, because it's how you envision your life. So I had to sit with all these deep questions around meaning.
It's much more personal, isn't it? Like, because it's only
Yeah.
you that's really dealing with the performance. Like an athlete, I've seen it in the basketball space where athletes that either played college or professionally, and all of a sudden there's nothing, they have to stop for injury or for whatever other reason, and there's nothing else that they know, and it's like life becomes meaningless almost. Like, and they do have that heartbreak as well.
Yeah,
It's harsh, I've seen. So
exactly. Especially because that industry for a performer, especially a young female performer, you're encouraged to lose weight to a certain point. And it's sort of, I had to process this level of abandonment too, because it was like, I was meant to lose weight to a certain point, but past a certain point, I became a liability. So I was encouraged.
wow, it's like a Goldilocks zone.
Yeah, and until I was abandoned, you know, and that also like liberated me, healing from that, all the bullshit that people get caught up with, you know, around just vanity and hang-ups. And I just decided to do life very differently. So I think I had a different set of priorities, you know, out the gate.
And I don't want to compare them either. Like it's a completely different thing, but obviously ADHD as a child, definitely all over the place, didn't fit in, couldn't learn properly, like just things didn't fit around me. But the one thing I learned much later in my life, and Mark, very much in the same boat, is turning those things that we saw as problems into superpowers.
Yeah.
Like to help us enhance the things that we do in the world to get over the hump. Did that come into play for yourself as well as you transitioned into, I guess, who you are now?
Of course, yeah, 100%. I think you have to, like, it's sort of, I kind of see life as like there's polarity to our experience of life, right? Always. And it kind of sounds cliche to say, like, you can only experience the highest joy if you've experienced the deepest pain.
Yes.
You know, but that's true, because it's kind of like it's this corridor that gets built in you, this depth, and that depth always is a double-edged sword.
Very much.
And I think in pain, the mind has to find meaning if you're going to get through that pain. You know, for a human to accept that pain was meaningless or in vain, I believe is one of the most psychologically challenging things. So we have to find a point of focus to transmute that pain, and for me to find a voice, because I knew that I was never going to be able to explain my experience in a way that every person could understand. So how was I going to build my voice in the world? And for me, that was entrepreneurship. But beyond kind of entrepreneurship, it was about sharing my story and inviting other people to share their story, which for the first, I'd say, you know, several years at least of my entrepreneurial journey, my focus was really about that. Like I was actually not, I never thought I would end up in tech, put it that way. I actually started in the nonprofit sector, which I'd say is the opposite of big tech.
There's hope out there, folks watching here.
I mean, you had some incredible journeys. I mean, you were top 100 most influential women, even by the age of 21. You had a strong voice and even empowerment, but one of your first, was said not for profit, was the Rouge Foundation, which you founded at the age of 18, which is incredible. Like, tell me about that journey.
yeah, so that was, you know, where well, I tried to go to uni. We'll just start there. I actually did get my degree,
I know
but
exactly how that feels.
I have no idea how I got my degree, but I did. You know, I lasted about 2 trimesters before I was like, you know, after that experience as well, I would sit in the back row of my lectures, and you know, Facebook was just becoming a thing. That was like 2010.
Yep.
Everyone would just be sitting on their laptops on Facebook, and I was going to a private uni. Like every class was like $4,000 or $5,000. No one was listening to the lecturer, and I just thought to myself, like, there's got to be fucking more to this. You know, like this cannot be it. And I was thinking about how I wanted to transform that experience into something meaningful. Yeah, and I eventually landed on wanting to found a nonprofit with a very different kind of set of a different ethos to what I saw happening in the mental health space at the time. And just timing wise, for people's reference, this was kind of just before mental health became this really mainstream conversation. Like when I say mainstream, kind of Are You Okay Day, Rose, sports players, royal family members, they all started to talk about mental health. It became a cause that was on the political agenda. This was right before that. And I had this very strong view that the cause of mental health disorders, not exclusively, but was largely a result of social and environmental causations. And this at the time was actually a really controversial opinion, because the leading voices were mostly, you know, well-known psychiatrists, psychologists that really believed this really is a biological predisposition. It's more to do with your brain chemistry. But I had my own experience of seeing how changes to environment and changes to the culture that you're exposed to improve mental health. You know, it sounds so obvious to say now,
It kind of does, because like
but it wasn't.
people going through like a
Yeah.
war scenario, you see how they get
Exactly.
massively impacted to the negative side.
Yeah.
So had it not been for that massive environmental kind of factor, their mental health would be different. But I guess they saw that as something else. But it's fascinating that we didn't see it that way.
Yeah, and it was actually because people with lived experience of all kinds of mental health conditions were seen as unequipped to actually have a voice in how mental health should be treated. And when I eventually did become National Mental Health Commissioner, the actual press release that went out is a person with lived experience appointed onto the National Mental Health Commission. So it was a big deal that my credibility in that position was actually a lived experience, because before that, you know, you would be disqualified to have an opinion because you were seen to be mentally ill, you know, which is insane. So you had people that, you know, really had never developed an empathy, a true empathy for a condition that requires so much empathy, actually, that were making all of the decisions and calling all of the shots. And I started to grow this grassroots movement around that, actually transforming the skills that I learned in theatre, which was around like the basics of performance, which is really about showing yourself authentically. Like I transformed that into storytelling. And I in the early days of my nonprofit, I would travel to communities and invite people to share their stories, and set a context that would make that this really kind of cathartic and healing experience for people. Like, you know, try not to judge each other, be open-minded,
Very much.
you know. And I would see the transformation, and people would tell me how transformative those experiences were. But this was so counterculture to what mental health said was appropriate. And it was amazing to see. You know, I ended up actually traveling the whole circumference and inland Australia for about 2.5 years in a van. And in that time, I visited 300 communities.
Wow.
Yeah, and it became a tour. The tour was called Champions for Change, and it started just basically by like me wanting to speak at schools, and then it ended up getting sponsored by Sunsuper, which is now the National Retirement Trust, I think is called.
Yeah.
They merged with another super fund.
Yeah. Q Super. So ART, Australian Retirement Trust. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that's right. So
that's so good though.
I know, and so like, you know, it was 50 grand, but as an 18-year-old, I was like, oh my God, I'm a millionaire. And it's like,
I'm on sky high. That sounds.
yeah,
When was that? Like, what years were they?
2013.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, end of 2012. And it became this incredible tour. So when we first, I then had sort of a team of a few other people and our 2 dogs, which is, you know, the best.
What type of dogs do I have to act as?
So one was like my dog was like a Shih Tzu cross Chihuahua,
Cute.
and the other one was like oh man, I actually don't even know the breed, like a small white dog. I can't remember the breed.
Like super fluffy type thing?
Yeah.
Like
Not a Pomeranian.
Pomeranian.
Yeah. That's, you know, too many years ago.
Little white fluffy one and like,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, so small dogs that were traveling in the van. And initially we'd have like maybe 5 people turn up to these community workshops, and then just watching the power of grassroots movement building, actually, where with writing to local journalists, obviously we're going to communities where there's no news happening in these communities, right? So you are the news, like you are the biggest thing that's happened, to this community.
Just like outside where there was the line just before getting in here. Guys, there's a Miss Dior cafe, something opening up next door, red carpet out there. And it's like, it seemed like it was for this podcast. It was not.
Yeah.
But you had
It
that.
was for the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in Sydney, it takes a Dior opening. In a rural community, it takes, you know, someone from the city to visit. But initially it was, there was only resistance. You know, people didn't want to talk about this stuff. I also experienced hate, you know, and
I can imagine.
but there's tenacity involved, you know, where you just have to keep showing up. And at a certain point, the gears changed, and it was actually, we were getting invited to communities, you know, and schools were asking us to, and then, you know, Sunsuper was doing the media for us. So we were kind of, we had this engine where I really got to experience growing this grassroots movement from nothing to what became this national tour. And I heard in that time tens of thousands of stories from all different walks of life. You know, we all grow up in this bubble that we believe is the normal way to live. You know, I think I think a part of my message and why I'm here to help people understand that there's no one way to live. This is something that theater taught me so much, because as an actor, you have to break past the barriers you create in your identity in order to be versatile as a performer. Because if you can never imagine yourself as a liar or a cheater or a whatever, you know, a bad guy or whatever it is that you're resistant to, you can't play that role. So you have to stretch what you understand your identity to be. And those 2.5 years on the road just took that to a whole other level of lived experience, where I was talking to teenagers in rural communities that had never left their community of 1,000 people, all the way to, you know, boardrooms in cities with people that had traveled the world. But the thing that touched me the most about that was, yes, everyone's story had different wrapping paper, different levels of privilege, different, you know, life experiences. But as they would really get to the core, like the tender core of what they were truly wanting, it was all the same. Every person just wants to love and be loved.
So true.
And that was it for me. When I saw that truth, I was like, we need to find a way to expose that in a way that's scalable, that's not dependent on one individual, that's not dependent on the frontline mental health workers that are overrun with demand, or the fly in, fly out doctors that are going to, you know, these communities once every 2 weeks and don't have time to see everyone that needs help. Suicide rates at that time were on the rise. And I just kind of went fully anti-establishment to the mental health sector. And I was like, we need a cultural revolution. And that was a very unique idea at that time. I had a lot of support. I also had a lot of hate, as you would expect. And yeah, that led me to serve as a commissioner, because actually the ideas that we were implementing in those communities worked. You know, they worked in a very cost-effective way. Go figure. It was basic communication and kindness, really. It's like the one thing the government hadn't tried, you know.
Video, show some love and share some, and especially make people feel like they're part of the story.
And it's something like
belonging.
a lot of people have that as currency. They might not be rich in other means, but we do all have that capacity and currency to give as much as we can in terms of kindness.
Well, yeah, or we need to develop that capacity.
Yeah.
Because this is what I saw. It's like the art of facilitation is you're creating a container where people can just kind of put whatever they're going through at the door for a minute and listen. And then also have the opportunity to share their story. And in that, you have kind of 2 or 3 hours where all of a sudden people do have a willingness to be kind. They have a willingness to show empathy. They have a willingness and space to connect in a different way. But transferring that to the busyness of people's everyday lives, to me, became the next challenge, because I became really good at creating spaces. That led me to eventually run retreats all over the world and trainings. And these were deeply transformational experiences, very unconventional, but deeply transformational. We'd have people leaving retreats, like, leaving 20-year relationships, quitting jobs. And that also occurred to me, was like, wow, what are we going to do about integration? Because you expose people and give them a taste of freedom, that you don't have to be a slave to your identity. You can make a different choice. And I think entrepreneurs are very good at this, because you have to recreate yourself constantly in order to reach that next level.
Definitely. The adaptation is like such a big part of it, of everything that you're doing.
Exactly. Adaptation, flexibility, the ability to deal with ambiguity,
Yeah.
I think is going to be the thing that separates amazing entrepreneurs from those that can't go that kind of extra mile. And most amazing entrepreneurs say it, you have to be relatively delusional. You have to have a delusional level of self-belief.
You have to be a psychopath.
Yeah, but
Elemental.
I like to sort of explore it from a different angle, which is, yes, I agree in a sense, but also when you understand how reality actually works, what I mean by that is we are creating reality with our thoughts, with our frequency in all moments every day. So it's less about delusion, and it's more about taking the time to curate your inner world. And I think going through something like anorexia, I had to rebuild my inner world from the inside out. Every thought, every behavior, that was self-destructive, which became my entire life, I had to turn that into something that actually helped my flourishing. And I had to do that consciously.
Yeah.
But a lot of people go through their whole life and they never challenge what they believe. They never challenge the way that they see the world, what they think. And that was the gift. And I think that's the gift in all adversity, is if you want your life to start moving in a different direction, you've got to change.
How, going through the experience leading up to where you are with inTruth, what were some of the hardest moments coming from, 21, being in government, supporting policy, and
Oh man, I mean,
maybe, as an entrepreneur
question.
especially.
Intellectually, I had the capacity to serve in those kinds of roles young.
Yeah.
But a 21-year-old's a 21-year-old, and I think that as a society, this is something that we don't appreciate or understand. It's the same with, say, musicians in Hollywood that rise very young. Like, they have talent, the talent's undeniable. Or they have the intelligence, and the intelligence is undeniable. But at the end of the day, like, you're young. And there were so many hard moments for me in that. And I acted out, like I had the polarity to the responsibility. I was so hardworking, really all through my teenage years, and then probably until 22, 23. And then my life kind of had this like stark contrast for a minute, where I had high levels of responsibility, but I would party really hard. And I look back and I'm like, oh wow, that was me actually trying to cope. I was trying to cope with the responsibility. I was trying to, I didn't know how to go home on the weekend and tell my 20-year-old friends what it was like writing recommendations for a $30 billion budget. I had no way of relating.
There's no easing into it by the sounds of it.
It was impossible, and then I also, I mean, you guys wanted to get personal, but, I also developed relationships with like much older people. And I think that that's what I needed actually, because they had more capability of understanding me. But then in some ways I kind of missed out on what I feel like I lost my teenage years to an addiction. And then I lost my early to mid-20s to ridiculous amounts of responsibility. And then kind of come or like probably 27 until 30, whilst I was building inTruth actually and doing all the things that a startup founder has to do, I had to rediscover myself.
Wow.
And that was like a dark night of the soul for me.
I see a title in there, like how building my startup helped me find myself or something like that.
I
Like,
was gonna say, did inTruth help you find yourself? Was
Totally. And like as a creative, right, I always see life as art and art as life. You know, we're always subconsciously, I think, building the thing that we most crave and we most need. Like anyone that has drive, people don't just have drive. Drive comes from somewhere. Ambition comes from somewhere. If you were fully enlightened and fully integrated, you probably wouldn't have much drive. It's just an isness, right? So anyone that has intense levels of ambition, they're trying to figure something out. That's personal to them.
there's an urge or something
Yeah.
there that's driving it. When I've seen it come from, actually, I don't know anywhere where it's come from a place of good. Yeah, unfortunately.
Just pain.
Yeah.
I actually was at this investor dinner a little while ago, and one of the questions that was asked, so the format was like a bunch of investors, and then they invited me and a couple of team members to get to know inTruth. And one of the investors asked the table, what do you think the common denominator is in founders that go on to build unicorns? And I'll never forget it. One of the investors said childhood trauma.
Oh, great.
But I was like, you know what?
This is not advice
yeah.
to traumatize your children.
Oh goodness.
But it's, I think, you know, a lot of the time it's true.
Yeah.
You have different kinds of entrepreneurs too. Like you have opportunistic entrepreneurs that are less emotionally connected to what they're trying to do. And it's more just like you see an opportunity. I don't know, like the people that supplied COVID masks in 2020 probably wasn't coming from a deep existential
Or toilet paper.
You know, yeah. I don't want to judge because I don't know that person's story, but I would say, but people that really go on to do something that challenges systems, there was obviously pain that was inflicted by the system.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the motivation, you know, to want to change that?
Whether it's your own pain or the pain you've seen from someone else, which obviously you often take on and you feel.
Yeah.
Definitely, I think it comes back to what you said at the start that you know.
I wonder if Australia being like the lucky country and things are really good here lends itself to just not having as many entrepreneurs sort of thing that are growing, and because
pain's not there.
The pain is there's not as much there.
There's 100%.
Like we've got a good economic system, we've got a good financial system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is actually true though. That's if you go to a city like San Francisco, New York, London, you know, like you're not gonna eat or pay rent unless you're the best.
Jeez.
And actually the average, it was my book publisher in LA that told me this when I first moved to California, and I was like, oh God, what have I done? She said the average amount of time that expats or foreigners, even people that moved to California from interstate America, the average amount of time that people last in LA and San Francisco is less than 3 months.
Wow.
So because it's, you know, it's hard. So if you have to commit, and everything is hard. I mean, any like expat who's Aussie that, or, you know, any nationality that's gone to America would understand. Like you go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and you just like, you're gonna like, I didn't even know that I had that level of rage in me. Like they make you wait for like 10 hours.
I was gonna say, so that's when you realize you're part of the system. That's like
like it just, everything is challenging. Trying to figure out the documentation. Like there's no place you could go when you move to a country like America that's like, okay, these are the steps on how to survive in America. You know, it's very different, I think, to being an expat, I don't know, in like Southeast Asia or Bali or so somewhere where the lifestyle is easy. You know, America is not an easy place. And so to make it there and to actually, you know, even get the visa process, you know, not having a social security number, figuring out how to live, like it's tough. You've got to want it.
So I guess from movements to government to now tech entrepreneur, how has this journey brought you to where you are, I guess, in terms of building out inTruth? How are you seeing yourself now, and how has inTruth, I guess, become your baby?
Yeah, so what I came to through the kind of juxtaposition of those experiences, like Grassroots, and then in some ways the opposite of Grassroots, which was high level politics, or, you know, informing policy as a commissioner. You're not a politician, but you're involved in that process. I realized that both those ends were needed in the same solution, which seemed kind of like the impossible problem to solve because it was a paradox. How do you create something hyper-personal, which is what frontline mental health workers or people like myself who were trying to do grassroots movements, so very, very personal and human, with the scale that came from, say, the distribution of federal budget? How do you have both of those things in one solution? And I didn't jump straight to tech, actually. When I left politics, or like I like to say, retired from politics at 25, went on a soul-searching trip around the world. Yeah, did a vow of silence in the Amazon, tracked the Andes, like really went deep. I actually wrote a book, and that was kind of like the beginning of my therapeutic journey. And the book started to grow this following of people that really loved and believed in what the book was about. And the book is called Love Out Loud. It was a philosophy.
Yes.
And Love Out Loud explores 9 key concepts. So the philosophy, to sort of explain it simply, it's just that we are love. We're seeking love. You know, that's what is motivating all of our behaviors, both good and bad. And loving out loud is the ability to strip the limitations and the resistances that prevent us from just expressing that and living that and being that in whatever form that wants to take. And people loved it. You know, people have Love Out Loud tattooed on them.
Oh,
So
wow.
that was like a crazy thing to experience. And that started like a different crazy chapter where I was traveling the world and speaking, actually, mostly. That became my life for a good couple of years. And I was experiencing scale in a new way, because I had content, you know, that was scaling, and I had impact that was scaling on a global level, not just a national level. But again, I couldn't let go of how much I knew that wasn't going to be the thing that was going to change the world in 1,000 years from now. But I wasn't a technologist, right? So it took me some time to land on kind of moving back to first principles thinking. And I think the space that the beginning of the pandemic created, that was the first time really in my life that I stayed still for a year. I always traveled. And this is also probably why it catalyzed the dark night of the soul. Like, I'd never been around the same people. I really had to face myself. I was so used to, I kind of got like the honeymoon phase with everyone and everything in my life all the time, because I constantly traveled.
Yeah.
So communities were constantly happy to see me, then I got to leave. Then it was, you know, my friends didn't see me very often, so they were always happy to see me. Relationships, kind of the same thing.
So all these highs.
It was just like I was riding high, basically, from like when I graduated art school through to 27. There was a lot of highs, and obviously, you know, there were lows within that, but there was always another high. And then everything stayed still. And I realized that I was dispensable, and that I had to create a solution that wasn't. And so I came back to first principles thinking, and I asked, what is really at the core of the work that I've done, you know, to date? And it was to help people build emotional capacity. And then this was basically my thought process. Emotion is arguably the most defining part of the human experience. It drives more than 80% of our decisions. So it literally is the thing that defines us. And that's on an unconscious level. So even if you're listening to this and you think you're rational, you're not. Humans are not rational. We're emotional. We make emotional decisions that we later rationalize. And that's autonomic. Emotions are happening every 200 milliseconds. You know, it's before the brain can catch up.
Often predisposed based on lived experience as well, right? So your
Yeah.
things you feel, the decisions you make are driven by the impacts of things that happen, whether it's the person you met, whether it's the life you live, the pains, all that type of stuff. They trigger those constant change of emotions and how you bring in everything.
How you interpret stimulus.
Exactly.
How your physiology interprets it. Exactly.
And you don't even know sometimes. Like maybe other people around you, if they really know you well, they're like, hey, I think you're a bit hungry or something like that. You know, yeah. Because you're getting a little bit angry, but you don't know, you don't realize that you're getting a little bit hangry.
Or if you're strong-headed too, which I think, you know, people like us, like I'll be working for like, 20 hours straight thinking I'm fine, because you're just strong-headed, but your body has like a very different story to tell.
So true.
The measurement side of things, I think getting to that, like that's really interesting, because that's a big part of inTruth, isn't it? Like,
Well, that's it. And that's what I came to in that thought process, because I was like, okay, this is the most defining part of the human experience. Who's measuring it? How have we... Think about the things that we have standardized. We've standardized the two examples I like to give. We've standardized language, which has allowed us to organize complex thoughts. It's allowed us to have debate, intellectual conversation. Without language, there'd be no podcasting. We'd just be grunting at each other.
that was the original plan for the first show.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Wasn't a lot of followers.
Yeah.
People thousands of years ago would have loved it. So that level of organization allowed us to reach new intellectual heights. At the birth of the Latin language, etc. And then we did the same for time, Greenwich Mean Time. We standardized time, and that allowed us to organize global trade. It allowed us to meet at a place at a particular time, and allowed life to have more complex structure that was global, time zones, etc. But no one had ever done this for emotion, the thing that was the most defining part of the human experience. And I got really curious about that, as my mind started to move into, well, what if we could do something about that? What if we could build a solution that changed that? So I asked a lot of intelligent people why they thought this had never been done. And everyone's answer was, well, it's just too subjective. It's too elusive. How do you quantify something that just kind of is there? That, to me, it wasn't a satisfying answer, because every person I knew from my work had this impulse and this desire to want to express themselves, but so often not being able to place or understand their emotional state was the reason that they couldn't. And so that was kind of the first realization. And then the next was, well, how would we measure that? Okay, well, emotion is autonomic. It's happening in the nervous system. So it is measurable, actually. Like, we have this subjective layer, which is, yes, it's subjective. Like when I ask you guys, how are you feeling? And you say, I feel happy. Sure, that's your interpretation.
Unless you're Australian, it's just like, yeah,
Fine.
I'm all right, I'm fine.
Yeah, fine is not an emotion. I like to remind people.
Your girlfriend is saying, I'm fine. It's like, she might not be fine. Right?
She's definitely not fine. Yeah, I can tell you that right now. So that's what, by the time you've said that, you've actually experienced tens of emotions that have triggered, like neurons in the brain, like in the body is emotion. And I also recognize, because every kind of occupation that has been built to try to help people with their emotion only deals with the subjective. Like, you go to a psychologist, it's conversation. How are you feeling? Well, I'm here because I don't know how to express how I'm feeling. So this is a really unhelpful dynamic. I mean, I'm not sort of shitting on therapy as it has its place, right? But I think inTruth will hopefully pioneer such a new way of looking at this and understanding it, that will look back at the way we used to try to get there, and recognize that we were kind of, using
We're like reading tea leaves. It feels like.
Exactly. Great analogy.
Because what you've got here, and in many industries, like I've come from a background of like financial market research, and it's about qualitative as well as quantitative. So the qualitative have always been there, like, what does this piece of news mean in sentiment? But the quantitative, that measurable stuff, is massively important in that space. And it feels like it wasn't there in this area, and now you're bringing that quantitative side.
Exactly. Well, if you go back to the origin of psychology, like go all the way back to Carl Jung, like these are amazing minds. But psychology was the only quote unquote science that was forced to be considered a hard science when it was built on soft data. It's the only science, right?
Did not know that.
And this is, kind of the joke within the different sciences, that psychologists aren't real, science. But it's because the data
I don't think we
you
got a lot of
you're using
psychologists watching the show, so it's okay.
Look, I have total respect for what you guys do. I'm just trying to make it better.
Yeah,
So yeah,
that's it. That's it.
you know, and if you go to a GP and you say like I'm struggling with my mental health, they'll give you a K10 test. It's a Likert scale, and they'll say, have you felt stressed on a scale of 1 to 7 in the last 14 days? Like it's so okay.
Yeah, it's like, am I going to answer truthfully as well? It's like,
Yeah,
like I
there's
guess.
so
How about
many
you,
layers.
so like,
Look, just give me the drugs.
prepare yourself.
For
Yeah.
who's like, I don't know, yeah, like yes, but also like, how do I quantify that? Like, have you felt tired in the last 14 days? Sure, like every human has, you know. So it's just bad data, like it's unreliable data. And yeah, like inTruth is bringing hard, objective, reliable, continuous data, which is the other thing. Like, you know, so what the tech actually is, for the purpose of your listeners, it's an emotion biotechnology that takes the raw data from wearables like the Garmin I'm wearing, translates that in an AI model, which has been taught to delineate the discrete emotional state, and then can translate that back to the user. This is taking a reading every 200 milliseconds. So all of a sudden we have continuous objective data that's actually mapping emotion. And when you think about the data that's replacing within not just psychology, by the way, but all industries, like you take most organizations, if you ask them, how are you capturing this data right now? Because it is very interesting to leaders, the sentiment of your team, you know, how people are actually feeling about their projects and their team dynamics and things.
In real time.
Yeah, well, the way that they're currently capturing it is an evaluation once a year or twice a year, and it's a self-assessment and it's subjective report. So maybe you have, yeah, as a company leader, you have 2 data points annually on Chris. What if we could replace that with a data point every 200 milliseconds? So the fidelity difference in the data is just insane. Like that to me is the real disruptiveness, because my end goal is to have a data set globally of emotion, that this data is considered equally as important as all the other data points that we leverage and use to make systematic and global decision making. Because at the moment, global sentiment isn't a consideration. You've had projects like you know, the Global Happiness Index.
Yeah.
You know, you've had people attempt it, but it's so hard to implement. It's still so subjective. But this gives us an ability to actually build hard data.
One of the points touched on is obviously it plays a big role in leadership in business, seeing how the team are tracking, or even yourself within the business. Not touching necessarily on the security or the data, that your personal information, but I guess the privacy around your emotions in work environments. How do you see that with your product? So the thing that comes to mind is, I know you had a meeting with your boss. Didn't turn out as good as that you thought, and you walk out and you're frustrated, and obviously you go and watch, picks up a bit of a heart rate increase, and you're a bit sweaty, and so you're clearly frustrated. And that data then goes back to this leader or manager. Let's call them a manager, because it's usually the managers that are the ones that get frustrated, not leaders, inverted commas. How do you perceive that in terms of?
Yeah, this is the most common question we get, by the way, and rightly so.
Damn, I thought I was.
So obviously it's a really important question, right? Because, you know, if anyone's looked at any of inTruth's content, like we are really gung-ho when it comes to data sovereignty as a topic and a subject. And I'm so passionate that, you know, I'm even actively lobbying in the US to make sure that biotechnologies are regulated and not data's not used, data's only used in the interest of public health, because that is a dark rabbit hole. We'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, we mentioned at the start, we were talking about the robots. So imagine like a machine having that information, knowing how you're going to react before you do it.
Not good.
I thought we were calling them
Really not good.
pleasure bots, no?
Pleasure bots, sorry.
That now knows your emotional
Yeah.
and all of your emotional vulnerabilities.
Very scary.
So so the first thing, we as a company have an ethos that, say you're an organization that's implementing inTruth, you as the employee are the only one to get your individual report. What the employer gets is the aggregate report. So there's no individuated data.
Very
So
smart.
They see the aggregate data, and you even have to be at a certain team size in order for us to do that. So it's, you know, impossible to figure out.
Yep.
whose data's who,
It's a
basically.
small startup with only 2 people.
Yeah,
I know
exactly. No, it's true. I know it's true.
It wasn't me that said this, so it must be the other. But you know, that's really interesting that you're doing it that way, because the company is still getting great insights
That's
at
what I
that
care about,
aggregate level.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Jenny from HR shouldn't really care about what you were feeling on Tuesday at 10 a.m. You know, that's not the data that's going to help them make constructive organizational decisions. On the other hand, what's really cool is you as the individual, as part of the inTruth rollout, will actually get that individual report. So you get that data, you get that opportunity to understand yourself. And we hope that that change is then kind of twofold, that the organization can make more constructive decisions,
Yeah.
that the individuals are actually empowered with that self-awareness and that self-growth.
And seeing themselves compared to what the norm is. And maybe it's like, wow, I'm really feeling emotionally different versus my peers. Am I in the right company?
Yeah, totally.
That you know, you subjectively
be
felt.
responsible for that.
Yeah. Fine. But I think, you know, it goes back to, you know, the start of this podcast. It was all about, there was no voice for this kind of stuff. And there was no voice because there was no way to standardize, measure, quantify, and actually have some insights that are coming out from the emotional layer. Now, because there is this, what you've been creating, and hopefully, you know, it spreads out more, not just from this podcast, but from many, it gives language to where there wasn't a language before, and a common kind of standard of doing it. So it's amazing that standards actually are what leads to this kind of stuff.
I love that you've brought that, you know, into the conversation, because this is why we call what we're building in ELM an emotion language model. Obviously, you know, a play on LLM, but emotion, because of how nuanced it is, I don't believe we're ever going to be able to get a fully comprehensive understanding through language. But what inTruth can do is build a visual language.
Okay.
Because it's data.
Yeah.
Right? So I believe that we can actually educate and empower our users to such a degree that they become fluent in understanding that data. So say you're in, you know, a relationship and you're going through conflict. Imagine being able to show each other that data and have the opportunity for immediate empathy.
Wow.
Past all the miscommunication and disagreement,
Yeah.
I know exactly how this conflict is affecting you, because I can read that data, actually understand that language.
That's amazing. Like it coming from my background as a data visualization person, like I'm loving all of that kind of stuff. But just from having those things being able to be visualized is what gets you to that truth, or sorry, that common understanding far quicker
Exactly.
than just talking about it. Or
It's so hard. Like, you know, I, for example, am quite like a logical, I have strong logic. None of us are fully logical, as we've already discussed. But if someone's saying something to me that doesn't make sense, I really struggle in a conversation to get past it, right? So that can mean that if I'm not self-aware, I'm losing empathy quite quickly, because I'm getting hung up on what they're saying doesn't make any sense. And as someone that really like wants to be a compassionate and empathetic person to the best of my ability, I'm aware of where my empathy starts to wane because of my wiring. But if I had something that truly made sense to me and I could understand it, then I just feel like for people like myself, my empathy would just be infinite. And I think that would that's my hope, is that inTruth can create this ability for us to just understand each other at the deepest level and just evolve beyond these ridiculous conversations around vulnerability being weak, emotions being stupid to talk about. And, you know, there's such a higher level way of approaching this whole landscape, in my opinion, that actually comes down to true self-awareness at scale, and to recognize that emotion is no different to breathing. Like, we cannot help it. And by hiding it and avoiding it, all it's actually doing through that repression is creating the opportunity for the opposite. You know, whatever's repressed in us individually or as a society, we're going to experience the other side of that pendulum. And that's exactly what we see in culture, right? Like you try to repress sexuality, and then you have a society that's over-sexualized, you know, and it's just trying to find its balance. But what if we could have the understanding and expose that so that we were actually able to be conscious and balanced in our decision making? I think now, because of where technology is tracking, that's never been more important. Because the risks that I see, especially, you know, living in San Francisco, you see people that don't have that emotional, spiritual maturity who are inheriting ridiculous levels of power. Like ridiculous, like unprecedented levels of power where single individuals have the ability to dictate what life looks like for billions of people.
Just look at any of the current LLM model, you know,
CEOs.
Sam,
Yeah.
all the everything that's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, so we need this. And it's we need those people to get interested in this, but we also need to help the world understand that power dynamics and power imbalances don't just happen one way. Like if we have individuals with that much power, it's because we have millions or billions of people that are giving their power away to single individuals. And that's like, it is going down that track of thinking helps you understand how, I don't want to say broken our systems are, because I think all systems are built to perfectly create the outcomes they create, but just how in need we are of different systems.
It's a good way to put it.
What's next for inTruth, where you're at? Because you are still you're kind of in beta, you know, by Garmin. What's next?
So for us, our biggest focus is working with what we're classifying as high stakes industries, high stakes, high stress. So that could be anything from, say, first responders to emergency workers, even like lawyers, surgeons, where they're dealing with very high levels of stress, probably, you know, big emotional highs and lows, and where their decision making has very high consequence. That to us is the kind of obvious fit as a starting point for early adoption, because when we show inTruth as a solution to these industries, they correlate it with safety. So it's a great place to begin. It's also very dynamic kind of data. Meanwhile, we're going through the regulatory process. So I hope sooner rather than later, FDA and TGA says you get the software as a medical device classification.
Brilliant.
And through that process, we're validating clinical claims. So diagnostic claims, for example, as an example of that, inTruth can predict PTSD, or inTruth can support the diagnosis of anxiety or depression. Once we have that tick, I want to see emotion positioned as a biomarker, no different to blood pressure, no different to heart rate, to actually make this something that is integrated into healthcare. When you see your GP, a physician, that they would consider that biomarker in the same vein as every other biomarker.
We're building some health tools ourselves and working with some pretty incredible people on that. And the biggest thing that we always hear is that empathetic side of the specialist.
Bedside manner.
And imagine them already knowing how you're feeling and being able to relate to that situation a lot more with a tool like this.
Or understand that, like, they, you know, usually they see you're in this kind of state and then they see heightened markers or whatever, and then it's like, okay, good understanding. But I was even thinking with parents, and whether it's immigrant parents or other parents, where there's just like a lack of understanding of your child's emotional kind of state, because maybe you were raised different, or you're just a different culture mismatch and different human being, and then seeing your child and going, oh, okay, it's not just them acting out, like there is,
You're not
they
judging it anymore.
like you're understanding, because like you said, it's a biomarker now, just like blood pressure. That's amazing.
Yeah, like you wouldn't judge someone for having blood pressure of 200 on 150. You'd be worried about them.
Exactly. You want to care more.
Yeah, you want to care more. And it's empathy is an interesting thing, because we all have a different way that we experience it, right? But I think with a common language, we're going to get so much closer to that.
I've got some quick fire questions to close us out. This has been an incredible journey. Thank you so much. But some quick questions for you. As a founder, what's a non-negotiable for you going into business?
That's an interesting question. Compromising my values, would be top of the list. And there's different ways that you know, can show up. I'd say that the biggest one is choosing investment partners that see the same future we do.
Work-life balance. What's the most important thing to you?
That whole concept is just like fucking rubbish. Like,
especially for mine.
It's just like, I don't know. I don't want to shit on people that try to achieve that, but I think when you're solving something that you're obsessed with. There's no,
That is the balance.
that is it.
Yeah.
It's not like workplaces and corporates going, you have work-life balance when you take away
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love it.
There's no clocking off at 5.
Yeah.
You're obviously, if we're here and we talk about AI quite a lot, what are the most interesting trends you're seeing in the AI space and potentially things that you're utilizing the most with the work that you do?
You know, emotion AI was not a thing
No.
that was talked about when I started inTruth. And now, I don't know if it's just my echo chamber, but it seems to be a really growing conversation. So that's, you know, an area of AI, obviously, that I track very closely, and then broadly where biotech is going, and what decisions biotech companies are making, and what data deals they're making too. That's something that I keep probably the keenest and closest eye on, because it's my passion. But yeah, like from the side of building in AI systems that improve efficiency, like I'm all for that. I encourage my team to do it, as long as it's as long as we stay human and empathetic, would be my kind of line in
Love
that.
it. Final question. If you had to start over tomorrow, what would be the one thing that you would do differently?
That's so hard. One thing, every founder would do so many things
Yeah.
differently.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 things though.
Okay, I want to find the thing that would actually be like the most helpful for a new founder. Don't, when you raise your first big chunk of capital, do not go and hire the most expensive executives. It is the worst fucking thing you can do.
Here.
Find the people
Yep.
that just
Yep.
like want to get into it with you, roll up
Yep.
their sleeves, are willing to actually work for under market rate, and that bring energy and actually want to be on the tools and be hands-on. I wish
Love it.
I had done that.
The reason I love that so much is one of the biggest things that people miss out on when forming businesses is culture. And
Yeah.
if you just go out and find that big executive high just because of the number and the experience,
Yeah.
you're missing out on building that culture from the start.
Yeah.
Whereas if you find the right person from the start, they blend well. You're going from a positive growth.
And they'll learn with you. And also the disposition, like I found hiring those kinds of people, they sat back and they wanted a whole team to execute.
Yeah.
And it's the opposite of startup culture.
Yeah.
You need people that are dynamic.
Hands-on.
Yeah.
And the irony is that as this scales and stuff, your tool could actually be used to help other startups find those right people, which is
I really,
which is awesome, right?
but please don't use it to, I don't know, fire people and things, because that's
Yeah.
going to be a PR nightmare for us. But yeah, looking at the collective consciousness and understanding coherence as a group, that to me is like one of the most exciting use cases.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Nicole, we can't thank you enough.
I've loved it, you guys.
Joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Cheers.
Amazing.
Very fun conversation.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. No, yeah. So I heard
That's
somewhere
the
that
next
you
show.
have a very open.
When AI partners become more of a thing, like I remember having an argument with a dude because like it was all about like, oh, we shouldn't judge AI answers, blah, blah, blah. We should look at the idea and the substance rather than the thing that kicked off on LinkedIn. Didn't expect like hundreds of comments on it. I'm like, I just wanted it to be a little thing. But one guy was like, well, if we're going to robots, why not? I'm like, okay, well, let's not talk about that yet. Like, it's the slippery slope idea.
On the podcast.
Yeah.
Because seriously, like,
Actually, yeah.
if our tech starts to merge with like bots that are also powered by LLM and AI, I think that's very problematic.
Is it?
So it's like a robot that knows your emotions,
before you
reads your
even made it.
emotions.
And can manipulate you.
Yeah, like that's and then is a sex robot. Like this is just
What-
and then you have all these incels in the world that just, it's a dark hole that
quote
dots
from
can create.
the guy who made the nukes is like, I become death, destroyer of world.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's your recording. It's like, you're going to be a great cover.